Well, let's get started on the lesson. Practice. That's what we'll talk about today. Our lesson title is Just Do It. And I want to add a little something to that. Just do it together. For a few minutes, for our study portion of this session, we're going to look at how Jesus and the disciples did what they did together. Well, let's read our essential verses for this camp first. Isaiah 40, 30 through 31, reminding us that we're working to become adult eagles. Youths may faint and grow weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Remember that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Pace yourself. Waiting on God is the thing that tends to get omitted when we're busy, instead of it being the thing we run to when we're busy because we know we need it even more. Keep working on establishing that habit so we can be the ones that soar rather than getting sucked down into the melee. So let's look at how Jesus and his disciples do it together. I've got a lot of scripture noted in your workbooks, and I'm not going to read most of it. I'll just give you the bullet points of the passages. I believe these are very familiar passages, and I'm not so intent to get into the details of what happened so much as just the fact of how Jesus did things with his disciples. He got them involved. He didn't just do things and let them watch. He certainly didn't just tell them what to do. So the first event is the feeding of the 5,000. It's in John 6, 1 through 13, and it's also in the other Gospels. Now, we tend to think of this as Jesus feeding the 5,000. But who actually did the feeding? The disciples. Jesus performed the miracle in multiplying the food, but it was the disciples who did the work of handing it out. It was the disciples to whom he said, "Do we have any food?" It's the same basic method as the feeding of the 4,000, which is in Matthew and also in Mark. Jesus says, people need to eat. What do you guys got? And they, we got a few little fish and a couple of dinner rolls. And Jesus takes the food, breaks it, and keeps handing it to them, and they keep handing it out. And they feed thousands of people with what amounts to one person's lunch. And they think, wow, and they're involved in it. He doesn't say, you guys sit there and watch me do this. You do it with me. Then there's walking on water. Jesus and Peter in Matthew 14, and this is also mentioned in Mark and John. Peter starts out walking on water, but then he falters and starts to sink, but Jesus pulls him back up. It's very much like we might do as we're trying to be Spirit-led and we think, I can do this, and we step out and then we feel overwhelmed and say, what was I thinking? I can't do this. But Jesus is there and he's going to help us get through it. Jesus pulled him back up and he walked back to the boat with Jesus. It may not be exactly like that for us. We may sink and have to swim back to the boat, but we will have learned something from it about being Spirit-led. We will have tried it and we'll be able to go on from there. The last one I have is Jesus simply asking the disciples to pray with him. Pray with me. When I looked for times of Jesus praying with his disciples, I was mostly thinking of John 17 when he's in the garden, but I found many, many more times. I also noted that while there were many times it says only that Jesus drew away from the crowds or something like that, without specifically saying that he did it to pray, there are enough times that do say he drew away to the mountain to pray that makes me think that that was almost always his purpose. I've got lots of scripture listed because this happened and was recorded many times, and many times it mentions that he took the disciples with him. But I have two highlighted because they surprised me, and I'm going to read those to you. The first one begins in Luke 9:18. It says, while he was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" And they answered, John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others that one of the ancient prophets had come back. But you, he asked them, who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, God's Messiah. Now, I've referred to this event previously, but I've read it to you from Matthew's account because Matthew gives more detail about Jesus' promise and commendation of Peter in how he receives this knowledge. What Matthew doesn't tell us that Luke does is that before that great confession, Jesus had pulled them all aside to be praying. Have I not said in the prayer training camp that prayer is as much about listening as it is about asking for stuff? They are away and they're being quiet and they're listening, and that's the time the Father has to speak to Peter this incredible revelation. We know from the Matthew version that Jesus says Peter didn't figure that out on his own. God the Father revealed it to him. And apparently, while he was in quiet in prayer, that his spirit was prepared and readied to receive that revelation when Jesus asked the question. The other one I have highlighted is Luke 9:28. That says, about 8 days after these words, he took along Peter, John, and James and went up on the mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became dazzling white. And suddenly 2 men were talking to him, Moses and Elijah. Now, I had apparently always focused more on the record of this in the other Gospels. This is the Transfiguration. Jesus is transformed. Moses and Elijah appear. But what I'd never noticed before that Luke tells us is that these disciples were up on the mountain with Jesus praying. We can see from this that Jesus is showing them, pray with me and find out that amazing things happen. Not the amazing things that we tend to think of when he's healing the sick and casting out demons, but God speaks. God reveals himself to you. That's a critical thing for the disciples to learn, and they learned it not because he told them, but because they experienced it from him. So we see from these a model of making disciples. We also learn then from Matthew 10:25 the goal of a disciple. It says it is enough for a disciple to become like his teacher and a slave like his master. So the goal of a disciple is to become like his teacher. Well, think of the flip side of that. What should be the goal of a teacher who is really a discipler, not a classroom type teacher? For your students to become like you. Now, that's a little bit of a scary thought to me, but it doesn't mean to become clones, to become exactly like me with all my failings and shortcomings, but at least following me and becoming like me in my desire and attempts to follow Jesus. As I'm growing and I'm moving closer to Jesus, I want others to be doing that and to be like me. It's not teaching as we tend to think of it. Nowadays, we think of a classroom. But Paul said, imitate me as I also imitate Christ. The way I like to put this and think of this, as I often do, to try to take this out of the Christianese that we don't even think about what it really means anymore, so we've heard it so much. I like to think of it as think like a coach, far more than a teacher. Think about sports. Think about teaching someone to play an instrument or sing or art or woodworking or sewing. The goal is that they'll actually be able to do it, not just regurgitate information and pass a test. I want us to think about what it means to think like a coach. What does a coach do? And in order to help us come to some ideas about that, I want to show you a few video clips. The first couple are actually a couple of our grandkids learning to play t-ball. And then the second two are older high school and college students learning to play baseball better, being coached by pros. As you're watching the videos, notice how the coaches coach. What do they do with the kids?
Hit the plate and slide.
You hear David saying, hit the plate and slide. Ethan doesn't do it, so David demonstrates. See a lot of pointing and calling and herding like a mama with her sheep. You see a lot of hand holding, one-on-ones with an adult to a child. You see very, very short step-by-step directions. The coach is showing Evie what to do, holding the bat, putting her feet where they need to be, pointing. Pointing again. And you see lots of encouragement. Encouragement is very important. On this one, it's our grandson Ethan needs to run to third base. Here you see the coach telling him what's going to happen. When the guy hits the ball, you're going to need to go to third, and then it actually happens. So he says, see it? Okay, go that way, go that way. Now, oh, whoa, wait. And Ethan and the other little boy follow the ball instead of running the bases. So the coach has to actually go out and get them and bring them back, and they get distracted along the way. And it takes a little more effort. And then Ethan gets back. It's like, well, wait, that's my base. Somebody's on my base. So the coach points him to third again, but Ethan doesn't even realize, and he's heading to the dugout. But he passes Dad, and Dad says, no, wait, Ethan, here you go. To third base. He finally gets to third base, and then we start the process all again. The coach is telling him, okay, when the ball gets hit, you're going to need to go that way. Now here's one that is an older player, maybe high school player, but you can see a lot of the same sort of things. The coach is having him do it, demonstrating, showing him how it works. When he doesn't do it quite right, the coach is saying, no, your bat should be here. And he's helping him to see. There's a lot of hands-on practice, doing the same thing over and over again, till the player gets to know what he should be doing, when, and how it should feel, and how it should look. Well, here is a college team who has the opportunity to be coached for a few days by a professional hitting coach, not just any professional hitting coach, but the hitting coach of the Yankees during a period of time when they were World Series winners. You see the same sort of thing. He talks to them, yes, but he also shows them what it feels like. You'll see him demonstrating. He's letting them try it. He moves their hands and arms where they need to be, and then he has them try it themselves. And he shows them how it's supposed to work and corrects them as needed, and they keep practicing, demonstrating correction, practice, demonstrate correction. And he says these principles apply to my level, to Little League guys, and obviously the guys at the college level. So what have we seen in this? How do we think like a coach? Well, the first thing is demonstrate. You can't just tell somebody what to do. If you want them to actually be able to learn a new skill, you have to demonstrate. You have to show them how. And then you walk them through it. You have them do it, usually slowly at first, just one little step at a time. You saw that especially with the little ones, but even with the pro. And then you break it down. You show them how all the little pieces fit together to make the ultimate baseball swing that's going to enable them to hit the ball. And if necessary, if they go way out in left field, you go bring them back. Be prepared to try to bring them back on target, bring them back to what we're focused on. That's what I've been doing. That's what I want you to do with somebody. Like I was saying, maybe just practicing with your kids. Maybe find a neighbor and say, do you mind if I practice this with you? I'm trying to learn this thing that I'm doing. We want to, remember, act like an eagle, which that is just an analogy for thinking and acting like a disciple, a real disciple. We observe, and we let others observe us. We observe how somebody else does it, we practice it, and then we want to find somebody else who can observe us and watch us and practice it too. We listen. We listen to somebody teach. We also listen to somebody that we're trying to teach to find out, where are they? We do this with them, and we found out, oh yeah, they know, they're good with the Bible, they read it all the time. Great, then we can have fun. We can just do this together. We find out, they don't really seem like they know too much about the Bible. So then we kind of try to adjust what we're doing. And also, as disciples and disciple makers even, we need to keep a teachable spirit. We can always learn from anybody something, even if they seem like the most immature, somebody who's brand new, doesn't know a thing. And so we need to keep that attitude that we're not the ones, that we have all the answers. And so we're going to fix these people, we're going to straighten them out. But with that kind of attitude, with that teachable spirit, then it's easier for them to keep that same kind of teachable spirit with us. So I really am encouraging you and challenging you to do this with somebody. Give it a shot. Try it. And come back next week and tell us how it all worked. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll be awful. That's okay. You learn.